Everyone, this is Matteo from Switch the Stitch, and welcome to our new episode of Three Questions With. First of all, I would like to thank everyone who watched the first interview that we did with Tony last week. And today I have the great pleasure to have here someone that I personally consider a big inspiration. I had the pleasure to attend one of her courses at the Sustainable Fashion School, and it's my pleasure to introduce you all to Lydia Brearley, who is the founder at Enkel and the founder of the Sustainable Fashion School. Lydia, thank you so much to be here today. And would you like to introduce yourself to everyone that is listening today?
Hi, Matteo, and thanks so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you today, and thanks for your kind words. So yeah, I'm Lydia. I'm an ex-fashion buyer with over 20 years experience working in the fashion industry. I've lived and worked in London, in Europe, in Shanghai, and I'm now based in Sweden. And I chose to move into sustainable fashion about 7 years ago now, after working and living in China and really starting to truly understand the impact of fashion and the complexity of supply chains. So I founded Sustainable Fashion School and Enkel last year, and I work with brands and businesses on implementing sustainable and circular strategies within their business. And I also run online courses and masterclasses working with brands and individuals to help them understand sustainability more so that they can implement positive change in their business.
The first the first question that I'd like to get into with you is, obviously we're seeing a lot of new different initiatives and business models that are coming up in fashion. They are claiming to be more sustainable, or to claiming to be the new generation of circularity. I'm thinking about rental models or second-hand or refurbished program. So I'd like to ask you, which one of these kind of business models is the one that you like the most, but also as an example of a retailer or a brand initiative that you've seen recently that you find particularly appropriate for circularity and sustainability in fashion?
Okay, well, I mean, obviously there's so much going on in the space of circularity and sustainability, but I think the second-hand market is really interesting and exciting, and it's an incredible opportunity for brands and businesses that can't want to be ignored, really. It's growing faster than any other part of the fashion industry and part of retail. It's set to double and to be worth 350 billion by 2027. And I think the reports say that by about 2028, about 12 or 13% of our wardrobes will be secondhand. So, you know, we're seeing this real kind of shift into our kind of relationship with clothing. And, you know, obviously, keeping clothes in circulation for as long as possible is the most sustainable thing that you can do. So there's a real shift from making kind of fast fashion and clothes that are maybe, you know, designed and made to be worn only a few times and then discarded, to making really great classic products that are well made. You know, they're designed to be worn again, repaired. You know, they've got kind of extended life, even if it's beyond the kind of original wearer. So, you know, I think this is kind of a huge opportunity for brands to incorporate into their business model. And, you know, we're seeing loads of companies launch their resale platforms and their take back schemes, which is really encouraging. I think the big challenge here is that ultimately we need to kind of stop producing and consuming so much in the first place. So the challenge at the moment is for brands and businesses to kind of recognize if they can drive revenue from resale alongside new, but actually offset some of that resale with producing more new in the first place. So it's a really exciting area. It's still kind of quite in its infancy in terms of what that looks like. But to answer your question, a couple of brands that I'm really kind of inspired by myself are two Swedish brands, actually. I'm obviously based in Sweden. So the first one is Plana Pirrit, which is a Swedish brand, which is children's outerwear brand, which has been going since like the 1980s. And they've got a really good take back pre-loved scheme called Used and Loved. And they're seeing a lot of success with that program. And I think what's really interesting here is that they really promote their used and loved alongside the sales of new. And that their whole kind of strapline is that their clothes will be worn by at least 3 children. So, you know, it's really kind of embedded in their kind of business and the products are, they're so great, they will stand the test of time, and I think it's really important to sort of have that sort of embedded. And another thing that they've done, which I haven't seen with so many brands, but one of their kind of iconic lines, if you grew up in Sweden and you were a kid in the 80s, everybody had this kind of rubber outfit that was like super waterproof, super durable, really kind of weatherproof. But it's basically made from a really toxic plastic. And so Pop, as I call them, have actually made and announced the bold decision that they're not going to make that anymore because it's not aligned with their sustainability strategy. And they're still selling it through their used and pre-loved range, but they're not actually producing any more of that as a new product. And, for me, I think that's a really brave and bold move and statement. And I think it's very kind of authentic, which I think customers are looking for now. So that's an example of one company that I think are doing some really great work. Another brand is Nudie Jeans. And they have a lifetime repair guarantee. And I think what's really interesting here is that when you actually see their kind of reworked or reused jeans, they actually retail at pretty much the same price as new. So I think it's this whole kind of concept of like recognizing the value in a product rather than a throwaway item. And when you actually buy that product, it's about investing in it, wearing it for as long as possible, and knowing that you can then sell it on if you get bored of it and you choose to not have it in your wardrobe anymore.
That's great. I'm actually a big fan of Nudie Jeans. So I'm really glad that you mentioned them. And actually denim is a specific area in fashion that really needs to change somehow in terms of how the production works and how much we produce. I remember seeing a stat that I think at any given moment that 70% of the world population is wearing some kind of denim.
I think that might be from me.
There you go.
I posted that on my Instagram, but yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Absolutely great. Yeah. And the amount of the amount of water used in denim is just, it's just astronomical. Yeah. But yeah, most people don't realize a lot of this stuff. And if I'm being really honest, I didn't, rewind when I started my career. We weren't educated in any of this stuff. So but it's really, really interesting to see how, brands and businesses are really kind of shifting now to respond to some of these challenges. So yeah, I think they're definitely one to watch.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what we discussed with Tony in the previous call is how, fashion really needs to look at this second-hand market, and you mentioned it as well. And it's great to see what the stats that you mentioned just now. Actually, a couple of them, I didn't know them myself, about what percentage of our wardrobe will be second-hand in a few years. And that's great. That the longer the life cycle of a piece of clothing is, obviously the less we need to produce. And that's the key part, really. And as you just mentioned, that was from your course, the stat about denim. I had the pleasure and the honor of attending the materials maths course at the Sustainable Fashion School. That takes me to the next question I'd like to ask you, and it's exactly about materials. So for everyone that is following us today, could you tell us one specific material that is very innovative or this upcoming in the recent months or years that really excites you, and why? Obviously, we see a lot of natural materials coming up and new materials, but which one is the one that really excites you and why?
Okay, I want to answer this in one question, but I'm just going to give you two answers if that's okay.
Let's go.
First of all, I think just in terms of ones to watch, I think bamboo and hemp are definitely ones that we're going to start seeing coming through more. They're much lower environmental footprint than cotton, and they take much less water and chemicals and all that sort of thing. So I think those are going to be ones to watch, and we're already starting to see more brands introducing hemp and bamboo into their ranges. But in terms of the one that excites me the most, I really like this kind of idea of like, wouldn't it be great if we could make new clothes from old clothes? And with that in mind, I think the work that Renewcell are doing again in Sweden. It just there seems to be quite a lot going on over here in this part of the world. But yeah, they are creating a new, it's called Circulose, a new fabric, and it's actually made from 100% textile waste. So they will basically take old clothing and they'll actually pump it down into like a pulp, and then they derive this kind of new material from that. And it's mainly from cotton waste, so not working with other materials, but working with cotton. And they've already been working with the likes of H&M and Levi's. And they've actually, they've only been going a few years, but they've outgrown their original kind of plant because there's so much demand for this material. So, you know, I think this is kind of really exciting because it will reduce the reliance on like virgin fibres. And, you know, there's so many clothes already out there in the world. I'm sure I saw a stat that said there's enough clothes to dress the next 3 generations or something crazy. So, you know, we almost need to deal with all the stuff that's out there and then look at making new materials that are lower impact. But yeah, I think this whole concept of making new clothes from old clothes is amazing. It's just, one is about scale, another is about affordability, and the third thing is about making it kind of infinitely recyclable so that it maintains its quality in new production. So, you know, still a lot of challenges for the industry to figure out, but I think it's, yeah, really, really exciting area.
I personally went for a little sourcing trip in East Europe recently, and the amount of samples that you see in some factories that are completely unused, that kind of connect well with what you said. If we could use those to generate new collection, that would be great. So we don't have to produce, we don't have to get some new fibers or new materials. Lydia, thank you so much for sharing this. This is super interesting. Now, we ask the same question all our speakers every week, because switch the stitch. We believe that we can change fashion one stitch at a time. This is what our motto is, as we would like to do. So if you had to choose one aspect of the industry to start this change, what would that aspect be? Is the first aspect you would tackle to start the change? What would that be?
So when you think of a brand, you know, it all starts with product. So I think for me, you know, product is number one. And again, we're seeing all these brands start resale platforms and take back schemes, which is fantastic. And it's almost easier to deal with the product that's already out there in the world than it is to sort of go back to the start of the supply chain and sort of navigate that. But I think that's actually what needs to happen. It's about looking at your product and looking at what your products are made from. There's a stat, I'm sorry, I'm full of stats, but, you know, just to sort of contextualize, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, there's a fact there that 80% of a product's environmental impact is determined at the design stage. So I think it's really important to actually, you know, look at the risks in your supply chain associated with your product. You know, what's the material made from and what's actually going to happen to that product at the end of its life. So it's almost thinking about the end of life at the beginning of life when you're designing it. So there's a real focus now about, you know, circular design principles and really kind of understanding how that product can be maybe broken down and sort of taken apart to be using those components again in order to create a circular economy.
So we come at the end of today's interview. Lydia, thank you so much for being with us today. What's next week for Enkel and the Sustainable Fashion School now? What are you working on?
I've taken on a bit of a monster, and I'm actually trying to write a course about EU and UK legislation and regulations, because I think that's something that's going to be game changing in the industry. So yeah, I'm pulling it all together. It's hugely complex and there's a lot to go through, but I think it's trying to take all that information and break it down into simple steps so people can understand, you know, what it means, you know, for their businesses and how they need to build that into the designing of their products.
Oh, so, yeah. I so look forward to attend that as well, and I really strongly suggest to everyone listening to this to attend those courses. I mean, the Materials Matter was super insightful. Lydia, thanks again for being with us today. It's been a great pleasure. And everyone that is listening, remember, all together we can change fashion one stitch at a time. And Lydia, thanks again.
Thanks so much for having me. I'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye. Ciao.